sky me, where brains go to broadcast.
We've all been there. You're facing down this wall of information. Could be a 300-page dissertation, maybe a bunch of technical reports. And the first thought is always, how do I know if this is going to be worth my time? Is this actually relevant? Well, if you're serious about gaining knowledge quickly, you need a shortcut. A really refined signal in all that noise. And that signal, that gatekeeper, is the abstract. It's probably the single most important tool you have for research efficiency. So today, we're going beyond just the basic definition. Our mission is mastery. We're going to get into the architecture of the abstract, how it works as a filter, the differences between the types, and some practical ways you can distill your own work down to its core. This isn't just about reading better. It's about thinking with real clarity.
And that clarity is just... it's crucial. I think we can assume most listeners know what an abstract is, fundamentally. But the gap between a passable one and a masterful one, well, that can be the difference between getting published, getting funded, or, just getting read at all. If you can master this, you're not just summarizing, you're making a case for informed engagement.
Okay, so let's jump right into that. People often think an abstract is just few sentences copied and pasted from the introduction. But that's the first big mistake, right?
It's the biggest mistake. The first crucial characteristic is that it is an original document. That's a critical distinction. It's not an excerpt. It's a completely fresh piece of writing designed to stand on its own.
Even though it has to use the same keywords from the main text?
Exactly. It has to use them, but the language itself is self-contained.
So it's a bespoke piece of writing, and it has to be impartial, too.
Absolutely. And this is where it gets really interesting. An abstract is not a review.
Not a review.
No. A review evaluates. It critiques. An abstract just reports. It has to stay objective, simply stating what the work contains. No judgment, just pure, distilled information.
And those content requirements, they actually change depending on the field.
They absolutely do. The structure reflects the goal of the discipline. So in the social sciences or, the hard sciences, the goal is empirical validation, data. So a scientific abstract must include the scope, the specific methods, the results, the numbers, and the contents.
Right. You need those data points up front.
Contrast that with the humanities: history, literature, philosophy. The goal there is usually to build an argument. So a humanities abstract focuses on the thesis, the background, and the conclusion you reach.
So science leads with the data, and the humanities leads with the argument.
Precisely. And if you submit the wrong type to the wrong journal, well, you've just told the editor you don't understand the rules of the game.
That structural difference is fascinating. So, okay, let's talk about why this document is so powerful. There are two main functions, right? Selection and indexing. Selection seems like the obvious one for the reader, the time saver.
It is.
Let's say you're doing a big research sweep. You search for something broad, like media influence on politics. You get hundreds, thousands of hits. So you narrow it down, maybe by region, but even then, the titles are just a guessing game.
And that is the universal research trap. Imagine you find a title, something like Rhetoric and Riot in Rio de Janeiro.
Sounds interesting.
It does, but your project is on modern political movements.
Bro.
Is this dissertation from, decades ago relevant? You could waste time and money ordering the whole thing just to find out.
And that's where the abstract steps in.
It steps in to provide that informed judgment. The abstract for that paper, it reveals the hyper-specific focus. It's about newspaper editors during the late First Empire, 1827 to 1831.
Okay, so just to give that some context, we're talking about Brazil just a few years after independence, a really foundational, dramatic moment. But why does that matter to our modern researcher?
Because the abstract goes further. It says the work covers how early newspapers fundamentally changed the traditional mechanisms of power. So even if the topic is 200 years old, that mechanism, the media disrupting centralized authority, that might be exactly what the modern researcher is looking for.
So they can make that connection without reading 400 pages.
Exactly. That is peak selection efficiency.
It's the ultimate executive summary, so that covers selection. What about the second purpose, indexing? This feels more critical for the author.
It's their key to discovery. Abstracts are the backbone of search in online databases. When you search, the database isn't just looking at the title, it's crawling the abstract for keywords.
Which helps you find what you need without getting a million irrelevant hits from a full-text search.
But here's the strategic part. As the author, you can't just use jargon. You have to think, what terms would a student or someone in another field actually use to find my work? The abstract is where you plant those keywords to make sure your work gets found.
I love that. The abstract is a marketing document disguised as an academic key.
Okay.
So let's move into the actual architecture, the two main types, descriptive and informative.
Correct. And that's the first decision you have to make. A good rule of thumb is length. If the publisher says 100 to 120 words max, you're writing a descriptive one.
And if it's more like 250 words?
Then you have the space for an informative abstract.
Okay, let's break down the descriptive type first. What's its goal?
The descriptive abstract just tells you the type of information you'll find inside. Think of it like a table of contents in paragraph form. It's a navigational tool. And the key rule here, it gives you absolutely no results or conclusions.
So if I were writing one for a study on carbon markets, I'd say something like, this paper investigates the scope of new EU carbon trading initiatives and models their potential economic impacts. And then stop.
And then you stop. Exactly. You include purpose, scope, maybe methods, but you deliberately omit what the paper actually found. It's short, concise.
Got it. Which brings us to the informative abstract. This is the one we see most often, and you said it acts as a surrogate for the work itself.
It's a surrogate because it gives the reader almost everything they need. It explains the main arguments, the key results, the evidence, the conclusions. It has all the descriptive parts, purpose, methods, scope, but then it adds the really important stuff, the result and recommendations.
Okay, but hold on. Doesn't that create a huge risk? If you give away all the key results and the conclusion, why would anyone bother reading the full paper?
That is a brilliant question, and it gets to the heart of why they're required. The journal or the funding body, they want you to take that risk. They don't have time to read 100 full submissions to find the 10 best. The informative abstract proves your work is conceptually sound and that your results are worth a deeper look.
So you're giving away the ending to earn the right to show your proof.
Precisely. It's a trust mechanism. The reader isn't paying for the answer. They're paying for the work that proves the answer.
It totally reframes it. It's a high-stakes pitch. So when you're writing this pitch, what are the mandatory rules we have to follow?
First, and this is non-negotiable, the most important information comes first. Always. This isn't a story with a surprise ending.
Get straight to the point.
Straight to the point. Second, you have to use the same style of language as the original paper, including the technical terms. You're writing for your peers. No dumbing it down.
And we mentioned a full citation has to come before the abstract. But in terms of structure, I've heard you can build a great abstract just by answering 5 core questions in order. The first 2 set the stage. What's the reason for writing? So why is this important? And then what's the problem it solves, or the main thesis?
Correct. The next 2 are about credibility. Question 3. What was your specific methodology? Be concrete. What model? What sources? Question 4. What were the definitive results? The data, the findings.
And then the last one ties it all together. What are the implications? How does this change things? How does it add to our knowledge? Answer those 5, you've got a solid draft.
But just as important as what you put in is what you leave out. There are 3 absolute don'ts. 1, don't refer to a bunch of other works. The abstract needs to stand on its own. 2, never, ever add information that isn't in the original work. No new data, no afterthoughts.
You're abstracting what's on the page, not what you wish was on the page.
Exactly. And 3, don't define basic terms. Your audience should already know them. It just wastes space and slows things down.
Okay, that's a great framework. But let's be honest, it's really hard to condense months or years of work into 250 words. So let's shift to some practical techniques for actually drafting and revising this thing.
Okay, let's start with abstracting your own work. The first technique is reverse outlining. So after you've written the whole paper, go through it and write down the single main idea of every single paragraph.
Wow, every paragraph.
Every paragraph. Then you group those sentences by section purpose, methods, results, and you distill those groups down into a single statement each. That process forces you to find the real skeleton of your argument.
That's a great way to find the core message. The second technique is the cut and paste method. For this one, you go through your paper and you find your most powerful declarative sentences. Your thesis statement from the intro, key topic sentences from the body. You copy all of them into a new document, and then your only job is to revise and weave those sentences into one unified paragraph.
What's a great one for your own work? But what if you're abstracting someone else's work? For a literature review, maybe. You can't just lift their sentences.
Right, the focus shifts. It's about what a future reader needs to know.
For that, you start by identifying the key terms. Look really closely at the introduction and the conclusion. That's where about 80% of the main ideas are.
And once you find those key phrases, the next step is critical. You highlight them, and then you immediately rewrite them in your own words in a separate document.
Yes. If you just copy them, you're transcribing. If you rewrite them, you're actually synthesizing and understanding.
I like that distinction.
And here's a final test for that, the don't look back technique. Read the whole article, then put it aside, and then write a paragraph about it completely from memory.
Oh, that's tough.
It is, because it forces you to articulate the one main point that really stuck with you. But, and this is a big but, you have to be ruthless in revision to make sure you didn't accidentally add any outside information you already knew. That's the fatal flaw.
Right. So no matter which technique you use, you said there's one final step that's absolutely mandatory.
Revision is the mandate. It is the most important step. You have to be merciless. Delete every unnecessary word. Find powerful verbs. Strip out weak modifier. You have to be as clear and complete as possible in the shortest space imaginable. This is where you really hone the message.
So what does this all mean for you listening? The abstract isn't just academic busy work. It's a powerful filter, a shortcut to knowledge. It saves you time through selection and ensures great work gets discovered through indexing. And we've seen the difference between that short, descriptive outline and the comprehensive, informative surrogate.
Yeah, and if we just pull back for a second, this tiny, meticulously revised document has immense power. It's the first impression. It determines what gets funded, what gets published, and ultimately what knowledge moves a field forward. It really is the ultimate test of strategic communication.
So here's a provocative thought to leave you with. If your life's work, that decade of research, that one huge insight, had to be distilled into just 250 words, what single sentence would you choose to represent its core essence? Start practicing that. Distilling complexity down to that powerful core. It might be the highest form of communication you can master.
Cascade me where brains go to broadcast. Cascade me, knowledge speaks, tuition sleeps.